Good morning. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for streaming with us. The U.S. is now reporting more than 100,000 new COVID cases in a single day. The daily average of new U.S. cases is over 72,000, up 532% since mid-June. Meanwhile, Israel has started giving booster shots to some of its most vulnerable citizens as the FDA decides whether to authorize boosters here in the U.S. We'll have more on that and what it all means as kids head back to school. Meanwhile, senators have unveiled the text of the bipartisan infrastructure plan, weighing in at more than 2,700 pages. It will now head to debate on the Senate floor, where some senators may try to make some changes to the bill. Negotiators will need to keep at least 10 Republicans on board, but some are already raising concerns about the amount of spending. The debate comes as millions of Americans are in danger of losing their homes after the federal moratorium on evictions expired over the weekend. Progressive Democrats are blaming President Biden for failing to extend the pandemic policy, but the White House says its hands are tied by the Supreme Court. And comedian Kathy Griffin says she's undergoing treatment for lung cancer. She announced the news on Twitter, saying she's having half of her left lung removed and that doctors are optimistic. Griffin says the diagnosis comes a year after she became addicted to painkillers and tried to take her own life. In an exclusive interview, she tells ABC's Juju Chang, "The irony is not lost on me that a little over a year ago, all I wanted to do was die. And now, all I want to do is live." You can see that full interview tonight on Nightline. But we want to go back to the pandemic now, and Dr. Fauci warning things are going to get worse as the Delta variant tears through the country. We're once again seeing long lines to get tested, this one in hard-hit Florida, and Louisiana is reporting the highest infection rate in the country, with hospitalizations there up nearly 500% from last month. Janae Norman is in New Orleans with the latest.
This morning, Delta variant cases spiking. In Chicago, hundreds of thousands of concertgoers crammed into Grant Park this weekend for Lollapalooza. Officials say 90% of attendees were vaccinated, but now they're monitoring for any possible COVID spread as the U.S. marks a troubling new milestone, recording more than 100,000 new COVID cases in a single day for the first time since February.
We're looking to some pain and suffering in the future because we're seeing the cases go up, which is the reason why we keep saying over and over again, the solution to this is get vaccinated.
The dangerous Delta variant, which spreads as easily as chickenpox, according to an internal CDC document obtained by ABC News. While just one person sick with the original strain of COVID-19 could easily infect an average of 2 to 3 people in close contact, with the Delta variant, that number could now be up to 9 people. 47 states and territories now categorized as areas with high or substantial community transmission. Florida reporting 21,000 COVID cases on Friday, its largest single-day increase since the pandemic began. And in Texas, there are now just 7 available ICU beds in Austin, a city with 2.3 million residents. And in Louisiana, hospitalizations are up nearly 500% in the last month. At the Children's Hospital in New Orleans, they went from 0 COVID patients at the beginning of the week to 20 by Thursday.
We have a premature infant in the neonatal ICU. In our PICU, we have a 23-month-old infant on a high-frequency oscillating ventilator. We've had 4 other teenagers, all unvaccinated, in the unit, and it's really taken a toll on everybody at this point.
Louisiana now reporting the highest infection rate in the country.
If this is happening here, especially in New Orleans with pretty good vaccination rates, it's going to happen everywhere.
Daryl Barker, a healthy 31-year-old who refused to get vaccinated, landed in a Missouri ICU with just a 20% chance of surviving, now fighting for his life as his wife and 6-year-old son watch through a window.
I was strongly against getting the vaccine just because we're a strong conservative family, but that little boy out there is a reason to have a vaccine.
Health
officials tell me the threat of serious disease for children is a real concern right now. This hospital recently admitted 17 children in just a matter of days. This recent surge is overwhelming first responders here in New Orleans, where the mayor says they are unable to keep up with 911 calls. Diane?
All right, Janae Norman, thanks for that. And earlier on Good Morning America, George Stephanopoulos spoke to Director of the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Francis Collins, about concerns over the Delta variant and whether or not vaccinated people will need to get a booster shot. Let's listen.
Let's begin with that issue of booster shots. We're seeing Israel offer them, the UK next month. Is it inevitable here?
Well, we're certainly looking at it almost daily. As you heard, FDA oversees this, and the data is gathering both from the U.S. and from what we've learned from places like Israel and the U.K. I would say right now there is not evidence that we need to go ahead with boosters in the United States, but that's an ongoing debate. So let me just be clear, though, that actually the existing approved vaccines in the U.S., Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, do have high effectiveness against Delta. There is no reason to rush forward at this present time for a booster decision, but we're going to watch that day by day.
But what's the harm in moving forward? Is it some concern that it's going to create vaccine hesitancy?
I think we just want to do the thing that's going to help people the most and recognize also that there's a worldwide shortage of vaccines and there are countries desperate to get access. And if the United States, with its large population, decides we need a whole other bunch of vaccines for our country, that means those are not going to be able to go somewhere else. We will do that if that's what's necessary to protect Americans. At the present time, though, the data doesn't convince us that it's time to go forward.
We are starting to see some children get more seriously ill with the virus and this other respiratory virus in addition to COVID. What can you tell us about that?
Well, it is very true that Delta seems capable of not just giving severe illness to older people, but also to adolescents and even children. Another reason, I think, why we really have to push forward as much as we can with getting vaccination rates up. I'm encouraged, by the way, to see a 56% increase in vaccinations over the last 2 weeks, and especially so in places that are being hit hard by Delta, like Missouri and Arkansas, Louisiana, Florida, which you've already heard about this morning. We need to push that. If you're really worried about the kids, well, let's get the people who can be vaccinated at a higher rate. We've got a long way to go in some of those communities to get to the point where people are protected.
We heard Dr. Fauci say yesterday on This Week that things are going to get worse before they get better, but he doesn't think that lockdowns are going to be needed. How do you see the fall playing out?
Well, I agree. We want to avoid lockdowns at all costs, but that means we're going to have to do some other things that won't necessarily be welcomed by people, such as the new recommendation of wearing masks in indoor gatherings, even if you're vaccinated, because we learned from that outbreak in Massachusetts that vaccinated people can probably transmit this, even though they are very well protected against severe disease. It will mean schools really need to have kids masked so that they're protected from being the source of spreading as well, and that's not popular with kids or parents. But if we want to avoid a more severe outcome that might lead to more extreme measures like lockdowns, we know what to do. We just need to do it. And oh my goodness, it would be so good if we could have that conversation about the data and the evidence and the public health arguments and get politics out of it. Unfortunately, that's not where we are at the present time in the United States of America.
You know, one of the things we've seen in England is a huge drop in cases in the last couple of weeks, even as they've opened up, and they were so worried about the surge earlier this summer. How do you explain it? Should we expect that as well?
It's kind of puzzling, George. I don't know that most of us were expecting to see that. Is that because this variant is so wildly contagious that you've actually seen the point arrive where most people have gotten infected, or at least enough anyway, that you're starting to get to herd immunity from natural infection? That's not something we want to see happen because that's going to cost a lot of lives, but it's interesting to see that drop. And there are people like Scott Gottlieb saying that's going to happen here too. I think he's in the minority. I think most of the projections say we're in for a really tough August, September, October. The best thing we can do to try to mute that very steady rise in the curve is to get more people vaccinated as quickly as possible. So if somebody's listening who's been on the fence, listen to that story from the guy in the ICU who wished he'd gotten vaccinated. Look in the Post today at the 39-year-old father whose final text to his wife was, I should have gotten the damn vaccine. Come on, folks. We have enough evidence now not to question question the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, there is no more reason to hold back.
All right, our thanks to George and Dr. Collins for that interview. So what does this all mean as kids head back to school? Well, a new parenting book out tomorrow aims to help families get a clearer picture. The Family Firm, a data-driven guide to better decision-making in the early school years, aims to cut through the clutter and assist parents in making more informed decisions, especially amid the confusion surrounding the pandemic. And best-selling author, Brown University economics professor Emily Oster is here to tell us all about it. Emily, so glad to have you on. I'm about to send my kid to school for the first time. I've got number 2 on the way, and I can tell you the decision fatigue is real. So you in the book talk about making structured, deliberate parenting decisions. Walk us through how to do that with the 4 Fs.
So thanks so much for having me. And, when I think about the 4 Fs, the real idea here is that we want to have a way to think about your decisions the way almost you would at work. So start with framing the question. What is the question you're asking? What are the alternatives? If you don't send your kid back to school, what are you going to do with them? Second step, fact find. Think about what is the data that I need? How do I need to understand the risks? How do I need to understand the logistics? How am I going to fit this together and really figure out all the information you need to make the choice? Third step, make a final decision. I think in a lot of these hard choices, we tend to let the decision just fester and fester and think about it in the shower and think about it when we're trying to go to sleep. You should really have a meeting to make the decision, have a time. This is the time I'm going to make a decision, and then move on. And the last step is to have some follow-up, have some plan that once you've made that decision, you can think about, was it the right decision after some period? And I think we should always be willing to change our minds, but we should have a plan for when we're going to think about changing our minds. I think if we do that, my hope is that it will help us all make better choices, particularly in, as you say, what's such a complicated time at the moment.
It sure is. And, you talk about fact-finding and whatnot, but most busy parents, we just don't have the time to be Googling all these different things and sorting through what's fact and what's fiction, which is why it's so nice to have a book like this. I know a few areas that you focus on are nutrition, school entry, age, school itself, extracurriculars, screen time, and sleep. But you say data doesn't necessarily make these decisions for us. It makes making the decisions easier. Why that distinction? Why not just tell parents, here's what the data says you should do?
I think the biggest thing is that for all parents, the choices that they are making are different. So particularly as our kids get a little older, we're all facing slightly different choices. And so with something like data on sleep, it's really relevant for many of the choices we make, but maybe not the same choice for me and you. So you may be interested in the question of how much sleep do kids need so you can decide, should my kid go to a school that's an hour away where they'll have to wake up really early? I may want to know the answer to that question so I can think about, should they do this extracurricular activity in the evening? So as we get into these more complicated, more variable decisions of older parenting, there's a need for data, but also a need for this decision wrapper around it. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to provide a little bit in the book.
And throughout this pandemic, you've become a go-to for many parents, especially when it comes to information about schools and pandemic safety. But you've also attracted criticism from some who say that you either cherry pick your data or you downplay risks to suit your opinions. What's your response to that?
I think I've spent a lot of the pandemic trying to create good data, trying to help people have more of a decision frame for the kinds of choices that they are making. By the end of the pandemic, in our data on schools, we had the most comprehensive national data set on schools, 12 million kids over a huge number of states, a lot of urban school districts, and so on. So, I think that I would push back a little bit on that criticism, but I would also say, I think that this has been a really hard time for everyone to make choices, and I have tried to be a voice to help people make some of their own choices while recognizing that it's hard to feel like any choice is correct with such a complicated setting with the coronavirus.
And it does just feel like the landscape is ever changing. Every time it feels like we have a peg on what this thing is and how to move forward. Now we have the Delta variant out there that seems to be throwing a huge wrench in everything we believed about this pandemic and what we thought next year would look like. So what's your message for parents out there who are getting ready to send their kids to school and wondering what the heck is going to happen now?
So I think the main thing that a lot of people have emphasizing, and I think we should keep emphasizing to parents, is that even with the Delta variant, kids are at very low risk for serious illness. And, the best thing you can do to protect them is to have the adults around them vaccinated. And I think if we sort of think about those two things, that there's something you can do. It's to get vaccinated, to ensure the other adults around your kids are vaccinated, while at the same time recognizing that we're still very lucky that the risks to kids are low. I think that can help generate both some sense of control and some sense of confidence as parents think about sending their kids back to school, which we know is really, really valuable for kids in terms of their mental health, in terms of their learning. So there's a lot of reasons to have them in school, and these are things we can do to help try to make that possible and safe and confident.
All right. Emily Oster, author of The Family Firm, a data-driven guide to better decision-making in the early school years. Emily, thanks so much for being here. And again, the book is out tomorrow. You can pick it up wherever books are sold. And coming up, Simone Biles is now set to compete in the Olympic balance beam finals. We have the latest live from Tokyo after a quick break. Welcome back. Simone Biles is now set to compete in Tokyo after sitting out all events so far. USA Gymnastics has announced that both Simone and Suni Lee will be in the balance beam finals tomorrow. Let's get the latest on that from Kenneth Moten in Tokyo now. Hi, Kenneth. How big is this news for Team USA that Simone Biles will now join Suni Lee in the balance beam competition?
It is major, and it was like a shockwave through Tokyo, through the world, because as soon as USA Gymnastics tweeted that Simone Biles is back and that she's competing on the balance beam, it spread like wildfire. And we know that Simone Biles has been taking a few days, almost a week now, to work on her mental health, to work on what she says she has is the twisties, that air awareness is off for her. And so she says her mind and body have been out of sync. We hope that they're in sync now if she's deciding to do this remaining event. And again, Diane, it was the remaining event that she could do here in Tokyo, because she withdrew from the vault, the floor exercise, and also the uneven bars. And so this was it for Simone Biles. But Simone Biles hasn't been hiding. She has been in the stands cheering on her Team USA gymnast teammates throughout the past weekend. Even when we saw Jade Carey, who won the gold on the floor exercise. We saw Michaela Skinner, who replaced Simone Biles on the vault, who was this comeback athlete who thought her career, her elite gymnastics career, was over. She competed, replacing Simone Biles on the vault, and she brought home silver. And guess who was right there cheering them on? Simone Biles. And so to see her back there, this could be the comeback story of the ages here when you have this six-time Olympic medalist, one of the greats, or the greatest gymnast we've seen, who's had a very, very tumultuous week back there on the balance beam competing. Is expected to be pretty incredible. And again, that's happening tomorrow.
Yep, she's been cheering in the stands, and her team has given her plenty to cheer for. I also want to warn people, spoiler alert coming now. And unfortunately, this one's not so great news. USA women's soccer lost to Canada this morning. But Kenneth, they're still in this. What's next for them?
They're in it. They're playing for bronze on Thursday, and this just in, they will be playing Australia. But yes, they lost to our neighbors to the North, Canada, who were not so neighborly. We ended up losing against them on a penalty kick on the 74th minute there. And also, we don't know if star goalie Alyssa Nair will be playing, because we understand she injured her knee, so we're waiting to find out her status. And again, wishing her well. But again, Canada beat our U.S. women's soccer team. They made it further than they did for the Rio Olympics when Sweden knocked them out. But again, they're playing for bronze against Australia on Thursday. And
Kenneth, after her silver medal win, U.S. shot putter Raven Saunders raised her hands and she crossed them in an X on the podium in protest. What did that protest mean, and what was the IOC's reaction given their rules against demonstrating on the podium?
Well, it appears, Diane, that Raven Saunders is the first athlete to do some type of protest on the medal podium there. And that X, you said she raised, apparently she says that it was after she collected her silver medal there, when she put up that X, the 25-year-old says that she made the gesture to represent the intersection of where all people who are oppressed meet. Now, we have reported right here on ABC News Live how the IOC's Rule 50, as they call it, they relaxed some of the rules, but they have maintained that they do not want athletes to protest during the medal ceremony right there on the podium. And so when we saw that action by Raven Saunders, this was something that the IOC has confirmed they are looking into. We don't know what type of action they are considering or what kind of action they could take, but we understand that her U.S. Olympic Committee is standing behind her. They say that they believe that her gesture was respectful on that podium and to the other athletes as well. And even though Raven Saunders appears to be in this IOC court, there's not really an IOC court, but I'm calling it that because I want to say that the court of public opinion is also standing behind her. I have to mention this very colorful character there, this shot putter from South Carolina. She's been grabbing a lot of attention online. You see that colorful hair. She's also had some pretty unique face masks, and a lot of people are rooting for her. And after a year of demonstrations and protests in the wake of George Floyd and other things that people have wanted to protest about and cause awareness for, this is something that we shouldn't be surprised about, but it is a little surprising that this appears to be the first athlete to have caused some type of protest or demonstration on the podium. Diane.
All right, Kenneth Moten for us in Tokyo. Thanks, Kenneth. And let's take a look at where the medal count stands now. The U.S. is in the lead with 64 total medals. China's not far behind with 62. The Russian Olympic Committee follows in third place with 50 medals in total. And coming up, there are more than 1.3 million people in prisons across America, and a highly disproportionate number of them are men of color. When we come back, we're going to introduce you to one convicted felon fighting back from inside prison in the nation's capital and making political history in the process. Welcome back. More than 1.3 million people are in prisons across the country, and a disproportionate amount of those people are men of color. Now, one convicted felon is fighting back from the inside, showing the power of rehabilitation and making political history in the process. ABC's Devin Dwyer has more.
From his cell block inside D.C. jail, Joel Castone is forging a new path to redemption.
One of my primary jobs is not only mentoring, but also being able to give you all wholesome content. Money coming in.
He teaches economics, leads Christian worship, and mentors dozens of fellow inmates in a program he helped create. And this spring, he turned to politics.
Who are your constituents? Who are the people that you're representing?
Yes, my constituents, first and foremost, the largest voting bloc of my constituents are incarcerated people.
After 27 years locked up for murder as a teenager, Castone launched a campaign for a seat on D.C.'s Advisory Neighborhood Commission and won, becoming the first person in the nation's capital to win election while incarcerated.
Had you ever voted before?
I never voted before.
So you were running for office and you had never even participated in the democratic process before.
Isn't that amazing? Isn't it amazing and how you can say, I want to be a part of something, but because the laws have prevented you, these barriers in place, and now these barriers are removed. So what we're doing here in D.C., we're actually setting the standard for the nation.
And you dress the part.
I will be your biggest advocate.
His election is pushing the boundaries of voting rights after D.C. last year joined just Maine and Vermont in allowing felons to cast ballots and run for office from behind bars.
Most countries in the world, unlike the U.S., allow people to vote while they're incarcerated. In some countries, they actually bring the ballots to the prisons, and others they allow it by absentee. In other words, in most places, you don't lose your humanity, you don't lose your civil rights, social rights, political rights when you're incarcerated.
Commissioner Castone says his election shows the power of a second chance. In 1994, it was here in Southeast D.C. that as a teenager swept up in a culture of drugs and guns, Castone was arrested and later convicted in the shooting death of another young black man.
I was heartbroken. I know that.
Delante Uzzle, Caston's cousin and best friend, says the tragedy of that day shows just how unforgiving life on the streets could be.
You could get hurt walking to the store. If Joel was fighting, we had to fight. If I was fighting, they had to fight.
How have you noticed Joel change?
He's always been that guy since I can remember. Always like the best reading groups, always been smart.
Were you shocked when he was elected as a commissioner in D.C.?
I was shocked, but it wasn't surprised. That's just always been him.
The family of the victim in Caston's case has given its full endorsement in a statement to ABC News saying, "We believe in forgiveness and we hope Joel will do good work in the community."
As a teenager, I was once a drug dealer myself. I was once a gunman myself as a teenager, and I paid a huge penalty for that. That's my incarceration. But throughout my incarceration, the best advice my queen gave me was find God, and I sought God.
His queen is his mother, still a guiding light for Caston as he embarks on a 2-year term to represent residents in one of the poorest parts of the city.
Maybe he's going to take that experience and share how he got through it, and so others won't have to. That would be good.
Some people are going to look at this with disdain, but a lot of people are going to think this is somebody who's really taken a step in the right direction.
His district includes D.C.'s jail, a nearby women's shelter, and this luxury apartment complex he's never seen.
How can you represent a group of people, a community, when you're cut off from a big segment of that community?
I would definitely answer that question by saying something no one expected, the global pandemic. A lot of meetings, a lot of engagement has taken place over Zoom. So now as an ANC commissioner, one of the things I do have access to is a computer.
So you're Zooming from inside this cell block?
I'm Zooming from the inside.
You have an office
I'm inside the office. Yes, I do, yes.
You oversee everything from liquor license approvals to sidewalk repair to public safety. Can you credibly advocate for public safety from in here?
I can, because those matters are matters that matters to my constituents. And so it behooves me to educate myself.
Joel Caston has probably more than any person in the country that I've heard of. He has the right to redeem himself and to have another chance.
Georgetown professor Mark Howard has taught Caston and encouraged him to run for commissioner. He calls him a model for the nation.
He's just so bright, outgoing, positive, inspirational to everyone around him. He represents not only the people in his district, but he represents all incarcerated people by showing what they're capable of.
Caston has taught himself Arabic and Mandarin, studies the Bible in French and Spanish, and has published a curriculum of books to help inmates learn the basics of investments and savings.
We want people on the inside thinking like citizens, and it seems oxymoronic, right? However, if we can get them thinking this way while they're in the inside, the overarching goal is that would be the mindset on the outside. So we're changing the narrative.
Later this year, he expects to start his next chapter on parole. Living in the district he'll represent as commissioner while chasing his passion for entrepreneurship.
Just taking the spotlight off me for a second, I think all lives matter, all voices matter, everyone's voice matter. And I think that when you look at a store like mine's, oftentimes we would just cast off individuals who are inside of carceral spaces and think that he or she does not have a value. I believe that my story demonstrates that, yes, we do have value.
Seeking redemption through politics and public service and hoping to restore faith in life after prison. For ABC News, I'm Devin Dwyer in Washington.
Our thanks to Devin for that report. And that does it for this newscast. I'm Diane Macedo. Thanks for joining us. And remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you back here at 3 p.m. Eastern for the breakdown. Stay safe. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.